Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
I'm getting a little bit of echo here. Hopefully it's a bit better now. So today we're going to be looking at some of these D&D zines once again. I've picked out a bunch of them ahead of time. Just I think that would be a little bit easier from my pile of shame that I have on my shelf over here. And I've flipped through them a little bit, so I have sort of a rough idea as to what they're about. But we'll be going through them live and checking them out, exploring all the weird concepts that are out there in D&D zine land. Let me know if the sound is working or not working. That'd be really helpful. So what I have today are the Adventurer's Guide to the Yolnaj Forest, this little pamphlet called MSX. We have the Galefa Guide to Troika. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. We have the Tale of the Haunted Ravine. And we also have In the Light of a Ghost Star, which is another short little adventure / system for sci-fi by Nate Treem, which I think has been used for a couple other types of games as well. Before we get started, shout out to some of our new patrons over on Patreon, including Brandon Lee, Xander Brown, Lester Dizen, maybe Dyson, hopefully I'm saying that right, Daniel Froelich, Jason Joachim, Kelly Grubb, Connor Douglas, Elliot Moschel, Zach Wolf, That One Guy, Ron Cruzy, BL, Cameron Orr, and two people who just signed up today, Victor Jones and Quest Friend. So thank you to everyone for supporting the channel on Patreon. I really appreciate that. All right, let's just get started here with the Adventurer's Guide to the Yolnaj Forest. Now, the only thing I really know about this is that it was, I believe, a Zine Quest product, and it is created by Zeshio. And Zeshio is the creator of the Pixel Hex tile set for HexKit, which is a really cool set of hexagons done in this pixel art style that you can use to make hex maps that I really like. I did a review of it a while back, but it looks like he's also creating his own D&D-like content, so that's really cool. Yes, for Zine Quest 2 there. So we start off with a full page map. That's really nice. I love it when books start off with a lot of context, so you can immediately see what's going on as a general overview. We got jungle over here, caverns, got a river system, the old wood, the crystal crevice. We have a river that's splitting. My brain. That's just a cartographer nitpick. Rivers usually don't split, but it's Fantasyland, so I guess you can do whatever you want. About this setting. So it's an ancient and powerful forest that draws its essence from a magical ley line that runs beneath the surface. Due to unexplained circumstances, something has corrupted the ley line, causing magical energy to explode up through the Yolnaj Mountains range and shower the forest with corrupted crystal shards. These shards have caused a sickness that infects the forest called the crystal disease. Crystal disease infects wildlife, causing them to act erratically. The trees and plants look like they're slowly starting to crystallize. Strange crystalline monsters, called crystallids, climb out of the wound in the mountain range, killing everything they see. To make matters worse, new settlements from the Dolari Federation have slowly removed large portions of the forest, weakening it further. As adventurers interact with the setting, their actions will impact what ultimately happens in the forest. That's great. So it sounds like the tone here, or the overall theme, is going to be focused on player interaction, giving players an environment where there's a bunch of different factions and just things that are going on. And the way that players choose to interact with it can have large-scale repercussions. And I really like that sort of thing. The forest should react based on your adventurer's actions. This is determined by the types of quests your adventurers complete, as well as choices that have a lasting impact on a region. So we have some scales here. There's two sliding scales measured by the health/death scale and the order/chaos scale. So we actually have pictures of the charts right here. So I guess we start out at 0, and these can slide up or down on these two axes. So you have 3 zones of intensity. To determine the forest outcome, the game master should look at the 2 variables with the most points. There'll be 4 combinations: health order, health chaos, death order, and death chaos. Next, the game master will look at both scales and count the scale with the highest zone of intensity. Apply this information to the forest outcome section to determine your party's influence on the forest. So I guess that means that if like currently you have points over in health and over in chaos, then you would have a health and chaos outcome. And then whichever zone was higher of health and chaos, you would look over here to figure out the intensity. So if you were at like over zone 2 for health and that was the highest, then you would health and chaos would be right here. So you'd look at this, and that says the wildlife appear to be heavily affected by crystal disease. The skin is covered in crystal shards, and they actively attack settlements. Faction infighting increases. But then I suppose as you completed different missions, maybe you could push it back down from health and towards death, and then you would shift to a different outcome. Creating, so you could actually affect what the forest looks like and what the factions and the monsters there are doing. It's a very neat system. You have some factions here. The Dolari Federation, which is death and order. All right, so these different axes apply to the factions as well. They're trying to push the forest in one direction or another, it sounds like. The 7, which is based on order. So it's a council of mages, scholars, and merchants who oversee the Crystal City. We have waterbenders. It's very Avatar. Half-water elementals that live in small settlements along the riverside. They act as intermediaries between nature and civilization. We have New Barrel, which is another order faction. There's a lot of factions here. How many do we have in total? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 factions. That's a lot. Wonder if that'd be too much to keep track of. I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. New Barrel. Primarily focused on rebuilding their mountain city, creating a welcome space for any willing to lend a hand or provide a service. Stone Branch Coalition, health and chaos. Advice to end the destruction and clear cutting of the forest. The Order of the Green Spear. It's a secretive group of druids to protect the Yolnaj forest. They draw upon the forest's mystical powers to seek out those who would harm the delicate natural balance. The Bornai, something like that. Tribe, health, and order. So let's see. We have 2 health and order. We have 2 chaos and death. No, wait. So 2 chaos and death, health and order, health and order, health and chaos, order, health, order, death, order. Does that cover everything? I feel like it does. At least all the main axes. It's not completely symmetrical, though, because you don't have one that's just dedicated to death, for example, which is good, because when you have this sort of perfect symmetry between all factions, it feels a little artificial. The Infinite Order of the Worm. The small goblinoid folk of the forest worship the great power of the world worm. And the Spider's Web. A small but growing crime syndicate in Volax. The Spider's Web looks to convert the vast knowledge in the city into treasures and resources. The members have ears in most places, listening for secret relics, hidden trade routes, and pub room deals. Uses its intelligence network to bypass or ignore the Seven's trade regulations, smuggling goods in or out of the city. Interesting. The cutting field. So it looks like we're getting into different zones. The cutting field being the section down here. So I'm guessing each of these sections is going to have its own write-up. Unsettling is an unsettling section of the southeastern Yolnaj forest, though it speaks to the inherent dangers of the area. It's been clear cut. So we have battles here between the Dolari Federation and the Stone Branch Coalition. So it's a hotbed of violence. So unique flora and fauna. This is really neat because it is relatively rare to see any sort of fantasy environment described in terms of its plants. We see that in Hot Springs Island, for example. So I always love to see more of that because it's another thing that you can add to your descriptions when players are moving over land, and you can give them unique types of plants that they can pick and examine. And I think that really anchors them in the environment. We have the corpse flower. It drains fluid and stores it in bulbs for energy. Mosquitoes are attracted to these flowers, and after drinking, they can spread a wasting disease called bedroll death. The cutters are aberrations that rise up from the soldiers killed on the cutting field. Bodies and body parts slowly slide towards each other and merge, creating monstrous shapes fitted with the gear used in life. They shamble around the forest edge and fight any they encounter. That's a cool idea. So they're just made up of like random body parts. They have 3 legs or have an arm coming out of their head. Good times. Yeah, roll on the table to get random numbers of arms, legs, and heads. Some characters and events here. Throck Rockface, Hill Giant Chieftain. Oh, it's a sentient owlbear. And Asura Stoneblood. We got lots of different quests here from the different factions. So you would roll an issue and an issue/problem with a character that you would have the issue with. So it could be negotiation with mushroom traders. And then down here, there's a complication. So maybe someone is a captive. It's a good way to quickly roll up some adventures. That's good. The MYCON Swamp. Sounds like it's going to be mushroom themed. Extra large bulbous tree mushrooms. Unique flora and fauna. We've got troads. Thick, slimy bodies and their webbed feet allow them to quickly travel across the muddy, swampy areas quickly. Their fingers splay out in long blades, which they use to capture fish and other animals. We have crystal crocs. Sounds pretty self-explanatory. The tentar slug. Will sneak up on sleeping animals, stun them, and then devour them. The puff shroom, chandelier caps. Some characters here. Slizek, Victoria Salavita, and Zilla Illustra. And I like how every single zone on this map has its own quests that go along with it. So they will feel different. There's going to be different needs there. Each of these relates to a different main character. Or at least a couple of them do. The jungle itself, densely packed with 2 fingers of the Yolnaj mountain range. The Yolnaj jungle was once the home of the Obsidian Hammer clan. An observant adventurer may find ruins and decrepit outposts poking out from the thick vines and bushes, betraying what was once a powerful mining empire. Traveling off the main trade routes in the jungle is perilous. The uneven terrain, vines, and thick undergrowth make travel extremely difficult. The roaring river that flows through the middle of the forest swallows everything in its path. Although downriver travel is fast, it's especially treacherous without a guide. So here we have some Jungara ants. I assume these are really big ants. Largely nomadic omnivores. Oh, the connected ants drop down like a net, capturing and stinging their quarry. So I guess they're probably normal sized. That's terrifying. Vampire vines, animalistic barbed plants that grow up adjacent trees. You can snag creatures. And jungle allosaurs. Yeah, well, you're in a jungle. You're going to have dinosaurs. So that is the rule, I believe. And we have Gronk Heaven Smasher. Nyla Wonder Wrencher. Gnome Industrialist. I like how everyone has an illustration. I think that's really helpful. Because in theory, you could just like take pictures of these, maybe with your phone, and then you could just show your players the pictures of the characters when they meet them. We actually have a location here. So we have ruins with a generator for making stuff there. Floor ruins, barrel ruins buildings. and some rewards you might find there. So it looks like there's no quests for this one in the way that there was for the previous ones. This does seem more like a toolkit. It gives you lots of content, which is good. You have lots of different characters to use. You have factions. You have different types of monsters. But it doesn't really put it together for you. So I think it looks like some work would be involved to create the actual situations that your players are going to get into. Although I think slapping things together wouldn't be too difficult. We have some vertical caverns, and the region around the base of the mountains are grotesque and deformed compared to the rest of the forest. The area is littered with knotted blisterbark trees holding round purple fruit. So we have these deep vertical holes shaped like slashes. Noxious steam weeps out of the ground, suggesting activity in the roots of the mountains. Thrill seekers occasionally go spelunking into the rifts looking for gems and minerals in the split rock. Constant state of chittering comes from inside the vertical caverns. Many small imp-like creatures flit between the crevices and the trees. Strange beings nest there, mostly undisturbed by encroaching civilization. This is where the Boronai tribe hangs out. They're trolls, okay. Are we going to get the tools necessary to explore these caverns? I assume so. A bunch of new creatures here, the sulfurite impus, the blisterbark trees, the crusted boar, and the world worm. Monstrous tunneling mob destruction. Fortunately, it was wrestled into submission. And anchored in a magical flower by the god Tusk. It remains imprisoned by the Boronai tribe who maintain the wards around it. It can strike at distances up to 160 feet, completely devouring anything to satiate its undying hunger. What's interesting is that there really aren't any stats for any of these creatures or monsters, right? So it is system neutral, similar to what we saw in Hot Springs Island. It seems like it would work pretty well with free Kriegspiel type stuff, where it's all just up to the game master's call in terms of how powerful something is, just by analyzing the situation, right? How big is this thing? How fast is it? How much weight does it have? And just taking all those things into consideration, the game master would just make calls based on how likely something is to succeed, whether you're trying to dodge something or attack it or whatnot, which is increasingly how I'm leaning in terms of how I like to run role-playing games these days. A lot of this stuff in RPGs can just be guesstimated at by a referee that's paying attention. We have some characters here. Shinzola, Human Warlock. No idea how to pronounce that. Quinn? Tarami, Human Warlock. Fitz Fireweaver. We do have some quests here, but we don't really have any information on actually spelunking into the vertical caverns. I wish there was some content in there. At least different types of rewards and dangers that you would find in there. That would be really useful. The Old Wood. An elder grouping of massive 1,000-year-old trees that lift from the forest canopy. The darkened area under the Old Wood holds many small lakes and ponds, and the land is relatively untouched outside of a few main dirt highways. Those entering the Old Wood for the first time feel like they're losing their mind as voices enter their heads and speak nonsense. However, a small group of scholars from Volax regularly travel here, attempting to gain insight into the tree's whispers. The western side of the Old Wood cradles the region's largest settlement, Volax, the Crystal City. So if we have the Old Wood, where's the Crystal City? I suppose maybe that's it right there. It's known for hosting some of the brightest wizards and scholars who study the great magic power under the Yolnaj. It is a key location for anyone looking to influence and curry favor with the major political powers of the area. You've got a Fey Spirit, an Undead Servant, Master Fultar, wizard and member of the Seven, leader of the Spider's Web. I think we would need more characters, especially for this. If this is like a political center, I think it would probably like a write-up at least of the main wizards there. If there's 7 wizards that are in charge, I would kind of like to know who they are. We got some quests here. Research gone wrong, for example, with mysterious forest energy. And maybe the complication is that you need to avoid combat while doing so. Okay, so here's an actual write-up of the Crystal City. That's nice. We have a picture here, a couple areas that are noted with just a sentence or two. Hall of Leaves. For those unable to access Volox's private archives in the Crystal, the Hall of Leaves is the single largest repository of books and manuscripts in the region. The Volox Fortress. So it's like a little mini dungeon. Okay, so here's the crevices. Oh, it's the big crevice. Ground zero for the crystal explosion. Along with the crystalids, crystal golems, and a little generator for figuring out the kind of crystal you have. Cause of the crystal disease could be anything. So it doesn't just give you one thing. It really gives you, or really encourages you, to come up with the reason why the crystal disease is happening. So you can pick something that seems right to you, or maybe fits better with whatever world you happen to be running. Crystal Crevice Dungeon. So you can roll for a number of levels and a number of rooms, and then it does give you some different types of rooms where you have a space like fungal and musty with a small waterfall. So that's nice. I think you would probably need more information than this, though, if you're going to run a multi-level dungeon. But it's definitely a starting point. Some interesting gear you might find in the region. And then the very back of the book, we have some fabled forest relics. So we have some magic items that we can definitely pick up. Seem to be connected to different factions. Or maybe not. Seems like some of these are just very old items. And we have a conclusion. So it says, as the final state of the forest unfolds, describe the aftermath to adventurers. Inhabitants and factions will all respond differently to the change. Perhaps creatures will flee the region, or news of the change will bring flocks of new settlers to the forest, hoping to create new lives for themselves. Either way, the outcome will create a shock across the region as inhabitants attempt to adapt. Very interesting. So it is pretty minimalistic. I feel like parts of it could be fleshed out more, but I mean, it's a zine. So you have to take that into account, right? It's not supposed to be a full-on setting source book. It just gives you lots of flavor and details for a number of different locations, and I suppose you would have to fill in the rest of it. An experienced dungeon master, I don't think, would have too much trouble with that. And I think a lot of the flavor in there is quite interesting and would create for interesting situations for players to deal with. That's the impression that I get. What else we got here? So in the light of a ghost star. So this thing came with a whole bunch of handouts that got sent to me. I'm not sure how many of these handouts actually come with the book. Maybe they only come with the physical version. So we have character sheets here, come in 4 different colors. And I feel like just by looking at character sheets, you can kind of figure out what's going on here pretty easily. So fighter, explorer, scientist. I bet these are different scores. I bet your ability scores are these different classes, and you can put points in each of these. That would make the most sense. I kind of like stuff that does that because it gives you, it covers both ability scores and skills all at the same time, because you can just figure out how likely would an explorer or a fighter or a scientist be able to do that. You got levels, current hit points, total hit points, and an inventory. So very minimalistic. It feels probably very inventory based, I'm going to guess, since that is such a prominent part of the character sheet. We'll have to read and find out to be sure. It came with this little map as well, which I think is sold separately from what I saw online. So this is Earth Expedition 1, and it is a big hex map. And I think the locations on the hex map are described inside the book. I guess you'd use this as a handout. Just put it on the table while your players are exploring. Maybe get like a chess pawn or something to mark where they are, and you can move it around. Let's see what we get inside the actual book here. It says a science fiction role-playing game by Nate Treem. We got some very bright psychedelic colors all throughout. So gameplay. Earth was abandoned ages ago during the Red Giant expansion. So this is like, at least 1 billion years in the future. Now dimly lit by the ghost light of a dead white dwarf, it lies layered with eons of forgotten civilizations. From the warmth of Martian reactor cities, scavengers hire illegal transportation to Earth to delve into its depths, looking for ancient treasures. There they must deal with ghosts, machines, and the strange life that has evolved on humankind's abandoned home planet. That's actually a really cool concept. After Earth has been burned to a crisp, and like there would naturally be dungeons and weird artifacts and stuff beneath the surface that you would have to dig up. So it's a fun way to turn all of planet Earth into a kind of mega dungeon / scrap heap. So the basic mechanic is if success is uncertain, then the player rolls the appropriate stat die. I guess you have different size dice, probably corresponding to those different things: fighter, explorer, scientist. A 4 or higher succeeds. A referee at discretion, special circumstances such as tactics or disadvantages, give a +1 or -1 to the roll. So you assign D4, D6, and D8 to those 4 different things. To fight, you use your fighter roll. Gain level upon delivering 5 treasures to Mars. So it is exploration based. You're trying to find treasures. We have some basic gear over here. Plasma lantern, light weapon, heavy weapon, light armor, etc. 0 oxygen flare, cell patcher. And we have some ancient alien tech here. So scattered around Earth are mysterious pieces of technology from alien civilizations. Each piece of ancient alien tech takes up 2 inventory slots and sells for 200 credits on Mars. Okay, so inventory slots are a thing here. We are keeping track of how much we're carrying. So these are similar to what we saw in Into the Odd, where they were Arcanum. I think that's right, if I remember correctly. Just weird artifacts that do something strange, kind of like spells in D&D, and they take 24 hours to recharge. So yeah, a lot like Vancian magic, really, but just sci-fi themed. We have the same map there. The transport ship lands in the dunes in the center hex. Pilot tells the scavengers she'll pick them up at the same spot 1 week from now. The job is to explore the area and find as many valuable artifacts as they can before it's time to leave. 5 hexes have been named locations, which are described below. When scavengers enter a hex without a named location, roll on the encounter table to see what they find. It takes a day of travel. Takes a day to travel across the hex. So you have 1 week. Okay, so you're definitely not going to be able to explore this whole thing, right? You can go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because you have to get back here by the end. So you have to plan how far you are out and how much time you have to get back. So you're going to have to be particular about which direction you're going. At first, I thought it might be a bit weird to give players the hex map, but you're landing from outer space, right? So I assume that your spaceship has scanned the area. And so I don't see a problem with just giving them the map, because that makes their choices a little bit more interesting. They kind of know where these different locations are, but they don't know too much about them. So they have to make a choice based on minimal information. So the main locations are the Astro Lich's Tower, fight an Astro Lich, Glork City, inhabited by mutant apes, who worship a giant space slug, who they call Glork the Great, slug god of destruction. We have the cybernetic monolith over here. Loud thumping music plays from large speakers. Multicolored lights flash in dizzying patterns. The Black Lake over here, infested with piranha dogs. The Foreboding Cave over here. Overground mound in an ancient rubble. An opening leads down into the earth. Disturbed dirt implies something recently traveled through this tunnel. Obscured by vegetation is a worn sign reading Caddo Ocean Aquarium. Thick humid air comes from the tunnel. This passageway leads to the sunken temple of the whale prophet, described on page 7. And we have random weather table here. Skies overcast with pink clouds, or clear sky, neon aurora borealis. We've got some NPCs here. Nurgle the Astro Lich himself. Nurgle is aloof, arrogant, and can shoot lightning bolts from their hands. We've got some humanoid cockroaches. This is definitely giving it off a very kind of DCC gonzo feel to it. What was that sci-fi DCC game? Mutant Crawl Classics? It feels a little bit like that. It's just very kind of goofy, bit over the top, very brightly colored. Mentally, I mean, and physically. Names for apes and cockroaches. We've got some earth artifacts. So here we have the random encounter. So you're wandering around in locations that aren't a named location. You roll on here. So it could be a legendary space whale just flying by. Ancient AI hologram kiosk. This ancient computer program was once some kind of help desk for information service for ancient Earthlings. It appears as a glowing, transparent humanoid chicken in a tuxedo. Eons of digital entropy have rendered it prone to malfunctions, but it will do its best to answer any questions it is asked. The referee can come up with their own answers or use a real AI like Siri, Alexa, or Google to answer the player character's questions. That's a fun idea. Sample dungeon crawl. So this is the Sunken Temple of the Whale Prophet. It looks like it has a good amount of loops built into it. So there's quite a bit of actual exploration built in there. A bunch of weird things like faded mural of cartoon sea creatures. Long hallway dimly lit with phosphorescent coral. And we have a reaction table. Always great to make things other than combat more plausible. We have a blank hex map here, which is pretty neat because that obviously allows you to create your own zone on the burnt earth. A location generator. Oh, this is great. So you could roll stuff like an obsidian pyramid occupied by posh talking apes seeking to travel to Mars, or feed human brains to angry imprisoned space slugs. And there's a whole adventure right there. Notes and sketches. Example of play at the very back. That's good, especially if you're new to role-playing games. But I kind of doubt that someone new to role-playing games would pick this up. But I still like having examples of play in here. So a very straightforward, minimalistic system. Probably good for one-shots, maybe just a couple adventures. If you wanted a palate cleanser between campaigns, just make players weird astronauts from the distant Martian future traveling to Earth and messing around with the ruins of Earth. As usual, links to all this stuff is in the description below. And while everyone's here, if you don't mind just like giving the video a like, that helps a lot with the algorithm, noticing that my channel exists. Let's see what we have next. The Tale of the Haunted Ravine. So this is a hex crawl adventure by Skull Dixon. Here we go. Tale of the Haunted Ravine is a hex crawl adventure of exploration that can be used for any game system, but was designed for use with D&D 5e. Hex crawl map and random roll tables are used to create surprising encounters and mysteries for your players to interact with. Wild necrotic magic, magical mutations, undead, lost souls, and demons, all cloaked in a fog. Oh, I think that's a typo there. A fog-choked landscape, forsaken by the gods and scarred by the battle fought here long ago. Will your adventurers survive and escape the haunted ravine, or will they join the legions of cursed souls imprisoned in this corrupted land? Let's see what we get here. Oh, Skull Dixon is in the chat. There's a very nice note from him right here. So we have this cool, I don't know, call it tapestry carving of the history of the haunted ravine. Giving you some backstory. So it's a hex crawl. Let's see if we can find a map in here. Get a sense of where we are. Oh, there we go. Hex crawl map. All the different hexes here are numbered. Some of them have letters. I guess we'll see what that's about as we go through it. Each hex is 1 mile. So this is a really big ravine system, right? Human beings can walk at like what, 3 miles an hour? Something like that. So you could maybe travel like 24 hexes in a day, something like that. That would be maybe a stretch. So you can probably get all the way across this in one day, I would guess. Though I suppose you're going to be slowed down probably by a lot of encounters. Voices in the fog. The ravine is full of dense fog that is a byproduct of the necrotic energies that permeate the area. It also produces a weird lighting effect that makes it hard to discern whether it's night or day when you are in the ravine. The wild necrotic energies can also cause several other side effects on mortals and dead alike. Living creatures cannot seem to get warm enough. They continue to feel a deep chill in their bones that stays with them even near a fire. Every day that they spend in the ravine, the necrotic energy in the environment can have an effect on them physically. This includes when they first enter the ravine. So you have to make checks against that. You can have strange effects that start applying to you. What are some strange effects here? Here we go. So D20 strange effects. When your teeth falls out for no reason. Your skin turns translucent, revealing your everything underneath. This issue makes it difficult to interact with other people. Yeah, I would imagine so. So you're not going to want to hang out here for very long. You're going to want to be getting in and getting out, I would guess. And if you die in the ravine, you start turning into different types of undead. You're going to need to be tracking time in the ravine. Each hex is 1 mile and takes 1 hour to travel from one hex to the next. Yeah, I guess the terrain is rough. So you're not going to make it very far. Players need to decide which of them will take on one of the 3 positions and the skill checks associated with those positions. So it could be a leader, a scout, morale officer, a mystic advisor. Each of them is going to be helping the party in different ways. We do have some factions that existed in the war on both sides of the battle. Below is a list of the NPCs that adventurers can interact with while in the ravine, depending on where they travel. The Bright Wolves, Human Halfling, and the Dwarven Mercenary Companies. The Sun Shroud, Elven Legion, army of mostly high elves and a few wood elves. The Alliance of Elven Nations that help protect their mutual interests along the borders of their lands. The Hollow Pact is a demon death cult led by an orc priest of Utrus, orc god of death and disease. They want to summon a greater demon and bring it under the control and domain of the orc god Utrus. Shadow Alliance mercenary and spy arm of a death cult known as the Black Parade. I wonder if they're still alive in there, or if they're all just like, these are different undead that you run into. No, I guess they're alive. Each one has a short description, undead type. Oh, undead types. I guess they're undead. Yeah, so we got ghosts, orc wraiths, and so on. Ghost. Mostly ghosts, looks like. This did... written and illustrated by Skull Dixon. Love the illustrations. Again, I love it when all the NPCs have their own little pictures that you can show the players. That's great. So they all have wants and does not want. That's good. You can immediately sort of figure out how they're going to react to the players. We have a living guy, living tiefling. Tiefling champion bound to this place by birth. His mother, a female warrior who entered the ravine as a young and beautiful adventurer, was taken by a devil who used to carry his spawn. She was held hostage to this devil for years, forced to raise Alex in this haunted realm. Setting up your map. There's letters and numbers. Letters are locations that will remain the same every time you play through the hex crawl. Okay. There are locations of safety, of known artifacts or events. Hexes that will have predetermined encounters that will never change. The numbers are hexes, where some event or encounter will happen as you play that are randomly determined by the GM, either beforehand or while playing. Okay, makes sense. There are special locations, including the gatekeeper waits. So this would be probably near the beginning. Yeah, there's a gatekeeper there. All that glitters is death. Rest in peace. Let's look at just a couple of these here. So the big bone wave. You find yourself in a section of the ravine that is swamped with bones, piles of them lying on top of one another. They accumulate to a height that climbing over them would be like struggling over a sand dune just to get over and past them. As you think about how you're going to overcome this grim challenge, you notice a few of the bones twitch and tumble. Then you see more and more of them follow suit. Soon the whole pile seems to be moving like a wave, rushing backwards like the tide being drawn in before the rush. As soon as it reaches the peak, it begins to rush forward to swallow you whole. What will you do now? That's great. That's a great image, and it's an interesting problem to have to deal with. A chorus of birds. Deep from the fog, you hear a low but strong sound, like a flute playing a single note, but arranged out of tune in harmony with 100 other flutes all doing the same, like the sound of the wind rushing over the end of many pipes. It increases in volume as it gets closer. Then the fog parts as undead birds rush forward in a swarm, their bones and skulls humming, making that awful chorus of death. Roll to save versus fear. A Charisma save DC 10 or be frightened. I'm not sure what the frightened effect in 5th edition does. I have to look that up. So we have a whole bunch of these. J, K, L. So all the way through L, it looks like. To determine the number of hexes. Let's look back here. Roll d12 to determine what kind of encounter this hex is. Creature encounter, obstacle encounter. So I guess it could be or a weird encounter or a horrific encounter if things get really bad. And then here we go. We actually have our tables here. So these refer to pages in the monster manual, looks like. TOF, is that Tome of Foes? I think it is. Oh, here we go. Tome of Foes, Tome of Beasts, Monster Manual, and Volo's Guide to Monsters. So I think some of these are official 5th edition products, and some of these are third-party products, I believe, but they're quite popular. Or I guess you could make up the stats for them yourself. See what kind of obstacles you can find here. You reach the edge of a frozen lake that stretches off into the fog as far as you can see. Do you try to cross the thin ice, or you turn back and find a new way? That's good. I love challenges that are really simple and terrain-based, like it's ice. How are you going to cross it? You could fall through, right? Is there some way that you can make something like snowshoes, right, to spread your weight out? Is there some way that you can like test the ice ahead of you to figure out where it's thin? Those sorts of things I enjoy because it gets players thinking about the environment. We have some weird encounters here. You enter an area of the fog where there are hundreds of mummified hands sticking up out of the ground from the wrist up. Occasionally a hand will twitch or jerk. Again, that's a great example. How are you going to walk across this area without hands, I suppose, trying to grab your feet? And some horrific encounters. Out of the fog, you find yourself in a dead grove of trees. Blinking open and following you are humanoid eyes stare and twitch from the trunks and branches of the trees you pass. That's very, what was it? Divine Comedy? The Inferno? There's part of the Inferno where people turn into trees, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I read that. Or out of the fog, you find a bloated corpse laying in the path unmoving. As you watch, a giant fat slug oozes out of the corpse's mouth. Gross. And we have some extra tables I guess you can run for yourself. So there we go. So it's pretty straightforward overall. Really, you're just traveling through this, I suppose, looking for treasure, or the GM can put things to find in there. And you're rolling for random encounters as you go through. You can get anything from just monsters to weird things to see, which I always enjoy. And maybe you're trying to reach some of these named locations, which can have interesting stuff in them. Again, I feel like I would probably give the map to the players. I wonder if there's a version of this without the numbers on them, so they wouldn't know where like the safe or stable locations are. But giving them a map so they have a sense of what direction they can go, I think is good. Otherwise, you'd have to be drawing it, I guess, on a hex map as you went, which isn't that big of a deal. I just have a penchant for giving maps to my players ahead of time so they can make choices. All right, let's see what else we got here. The Gaelefa Guide to Troika. So I flipped through this ahead of time, and from my understanding, it's mostly just a location or a new, what they call them, planes for Troika, a sphere for Troika, I think is the term, mostly described via the kinds of classes that are there. This is written and published by Brian Erickson, editing by Jarrett Crater and Kelsey Kazmak, layout by Brian Erickson and David N. Wilkie, and character illustrations by Annette Bell, enemy illustrations by Sam Amelli. There's Sam. He shows up in a lot of these zines. So this is for Troika. The supplement is set in the world of Gaelefa, pronounced, oh, here we go, Galafa. Okay, well, I probably should have read that ahead of time. This is a high fantasy world imagined by Brian Erickson, the creator of Omnimyth. Magic is plentiful, elves are not dying out, and folk are still creating some really cool stuff. The beings of this other world have a variety of games which they play to pass the time. Yes, some follow the tired trend of cards, chess likes, and other manner of gambling. But in Gaelefa, The world is finding itself in a bit of a renaissance, and any starving artists may find themselves lifted by the tides of fortune, carried by the success of their next great work. Oh, so Troika is actually played in this game, or in this world. That's very meta. Let's see. It's a playbook of hyperbolic imaginings of powerful mages, heroic knights, swaggering spring folk, and vile Kassir. Make the mundane of this world extraordinary as you explore the Golden Steppe, leap across the red roofs of Caravale, or attempt to hide from the terrible tax collectors of Squall. The planar overlay. The sphere of Galitha is constructed of a series of overlaid planes connected by roots, tunnels, and bridges of fractured dreams and thought. So Yorith as the anchor world, the planar overlay, Yorith is orbited by the moons Gala and Lepha. It is the centermost world of the planar overlay and is home to all the mortal races. The player of Yorith are varied and driven, believing in titans and gods whose age span millennia. Okay, does this have a picture? Okay, there we go. Here's a picture. That is really helpful. I was getting confused by what's going on here. So we have like our different, I guess, mini planes that are connected together. So maybe it's more than one sphere. Some character background. So again, we have 36, just like in the original Troika. So you roll it by 2d6. The Bonyfish franchise hopeful. After years of working that awful port job, you finally saw a light. When you completed your labor at his establishment, only one thing stood between you and your own Bonyfish family food house: money. So you're going to start your own franchise, looks like. Bramblewood cultist, coral spelunkers, draconic brood hatchers, drift scale slingers, edgeworlders, giant beetle breeder. There are so many things you can craft with beetle byproducts, but marsh living is not for everybody. It's a harsh life, and there are many opportunities for an enterprising individual with a giant beetle of their own. Oh, awesome. It's good to give players a stuff to ride or any sort of mount. They always find fun uses for that, especially when it's a giant beetle. So you get beetle bites, cocooning hook, cowardly giant beetle, marshwood club, swamp waders, 50-foot cocoon silk rope, and you get skills in beetlecraft, beetle handling, club fighting, knife fighting, and ride. Although cowardly and thus useless in combat, a giant beetle packs a lot of trunk space under its wings, as a carrying capacity of 10. And it looks kind of like a Goliath beetle, so maybe it'd be great for pushing stuff over, or maybe dragging stuff behind it. I can think of all sorts of ways you could use that. Golden Witch of Florigen, Bug Hunters, Iron King's Taxman. You've wanted to be a tax collector since you took your very first breath in, only to release it in a screaming wail at all those unjust, tax-avoiding ingrates out in the world. Your father, of course, was not present at your birth, for someone must always be collecting the iron price. Badge of Utmost Authority. You get a strong box, manacles, plate mail, awareness, evaluate, lock, strength, tracking. You add +2 to tests relating to finding money or valuables belonging to those who have a debt. So you're sort of like the bad guy in Electric Bastion Land. You're just hunting down those miscreants who aren't paying back their debts. Knight of the Black Rose, Knight of the Tin Order. Patron of St. Matthias, you've always had an affinity with the bookish arts. Whether it be reading, writing, or transcribing, paper and the information it carries are a soothing balm in an otherwise burdensome world. Never did you think you would so literally be caught up in the pages as when you read the scripture of St. Matthias. It took but a moment for that literal rat to work his way into your heart and mind, but you very quickly recognized a kindred spirit. So the saint is actually a rat. That's funny. Cheddar Bites, Mountain Pen, or Fountain Pen. Scrap of mystically absorbent paper, 3 5-ounce bottles of ink. So your specials are anything written on your magical parchment soon disappears, having been sent to the sacred and eternal libraries. You may access anything that you have or another patron of St. Matthias have contributed to the sacred and eternal libraries by testing your luck. So it's like you're working on a miniature medieval Wikipedia that only you and other monks of St. Matthias have been working on. Press Gang to Pirate. Sage Witch. So really, you're going to have to put the location together in your head by reading these. Or I suppose you could just steal them in general and just plunk them into the main sphere of Troika. I think they would do just as well anywhere else. We have some enemies. Ferngull. Oh yeah, this feels like Sam Melly. That's a great illustration. Bird-like plantoids found in Galifa's dense forests and swamps. When struck, they release a shower of spores. The person striking them must test their luck or skill for enemies, and on a failure becomes paralyzed for the remainder of the round. A wasp? Or is it a wasp? I don't know. The AE sound, I never know what to make of that. In this, it seems to be just sort of like a schwa, like an sound. I don't know. The pyrogenic fennec. And Mog. And lots of items, magical and mundane. Here's some curses you can put on them. So this is a D666. You're rolling 3d6 here. And it could be anything fairly ordinary like soap. Or is there anything really weird here that you can find? A Draco teapot, cursed item. Some tools like thermometers. This would work pretty well as a, I search the body table. Well, I see. The number of gems here is how valuable it is. That's what I would guess. It's like saddles are more expensive. That seems to make sense here. Interesting. So it seems like a good expansion just if you want more character classes for Troika. Or if you want to try and expand it into an actual setting. And lastly, we're going to look at this little pamphlet, MSX. Again, this also comes with a number of little handouts here. Let's see what we got. Oh, that is a letter to me, so I'm just going to set that off to the side there. What do we got in here? We have a little map here with hexes. It's a little bit hard to see, but there's definitely hexes very faintly drawn on there that are numbered. I suppose you could use this to write on if you wanted to expand it into your own map. Would a wet erase or dry erase marker work on this? Maybe. It seems kind of glossy. But just a blank map that you can use for creating your own setting, seems like. Let's see what we get here. I created this game during the COVID-19. Well, your attributes 1d6 each, physical, mental, luck. Adjust your scores. 1 becomes 2s, 6s become 5s. Write down your modifiers. Interesting. So that means that 2s and 5s are going to be the most common things to roll, right? Because 2 different results give, that result. Modifiers, 2 gives you -1, 3 and 4 gives that, 5 gives you a +1. Okay. Define your hit points. Hit points equals physical. Okay, so your physical score is the same as your hit points. Dead when you reach negative. 0 is unconscious. I guess positive means alive. It's kind of symbolic. You have to interpret it a little bit. Record your defense. Defense equals physical plus mental. Shield gives you +1. Your occupation could be a slave, a shepherd, a bandit, a sentinel, a blacksmith, or a mercenary. That gives you treasure and a weapon that you start off with. You're skilled with that weapon. You can roll for another. Discover your origin. So we have 6 different locations here. So it could be Tilung. Your distant homeland is known as the Empire of the Celestial Dragon, where terrible sorcerers use their mighty spells to force their will upon people. You can trick an enchanter avoiding its charming power. Test your luck to resist a demon's charm once a day. Test your luck. Roll d6 under your luck sense to under your luck score. Blessed. Roll 1d6 if you succeed the luck test. How often can you do this? Can you just roll your luck a lot? Is it only in certain circumstances? I guess that's up to the GM. Doomed, roll 1d6 if you fail. Oh, if you fail a luck test. Oh, okay. So you can do it all the time, but you could just get doomed a lot. Could be a frozen in fear. You always lose individual initiative against Sons of Skandir. So there's built-in factions here, it sounds like. Interesting. So it definitely has an implied setting. Fighting system, roll 1d6 plus physical modifier. The higher number goes first, and then proceed in decreasing order. 2d6 plus physical modifier to attack. You got different kinds of weapons here with built-in damages, how much they cost. So how does armor work? Test your luck. If successful, roll d3 for armor type. I guess this is when you're making your character. You get some armor, and the armor, it soaks a certain number of points, which I guess you roll for when you're hit, or is it static? I guess that's up to you. You have some basic encounters you can roll here and some types of treasure. So it is just a very minimalistic little zine for running fantasy adventure type games. It has like the 3 stats, which reminds me of things like Into the Odd or Maze Rats. But it definitely seems more open in the sense that I get the feeling you're really supposed to hack this quite a bit, especially with that big blank map, or just steal ideas from it. Interesting. Okay. Well, I mean, that's 5 stuff here. We just hit exactly 1 hour. Perfect timing on my part. That was totally coincidence. So those are a few new zines that I wanted to check out today. These are all down in the description below if you want to check them out for yourself. These are really interesting. It's great to see the diversity of the types of things that people are making. Anywhere from really simple little systems for just running games all the way up to fairly complex and robust adventures with the Haunted Ravine, or whole settings with things like the Olnage Forest. So it's really great to see all the different things that people are coming up with out there and packing into these really small formats, which are so much easier to produce. Recently, I've been working on my zine, The Waking of Willoughby Hall, which is mostly all done. I'm just doing layout, which always takes longer than you might expect. And it's the more that I do it, the more that I respect people who are putting out zines like this regularly, because it's a lot more work than you might think. So great job, everybody, for putting out this stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing more of this stuff. I want to do more live streams like this where I get through my pile and show off all the different stuff that people have been sending me, and just giving it more exposure to people out there in the D&D world. But thanks for hanging out, everybody. I really appreciate you stopping by, and I'll be seeing you guys later. Thanks for watching.